Found a good still, good price, but it's from a foreign country. Can you use it here in the U.S.? Let's answer that question. I'm George from Barley and Hops, and we're going to try to unlock all the mysteries of home distilling that we possibly can. And we're just glad you joined us today. So stick with us. We're going to do something about this electrical issue. Now, when I got this 36-liter still in, they sent me an email, and this is from beautifulchineseantiques.com. They've got a whole line of these things in several different sizes for different prices. They seem to be fairly reasonable. But your challenge is always going to be whenever you purchase something sight unseen, except for what you can find on the internet, there's a certain amount of trust that goes into that. And I understand that. But there's also a certain amount of understanding beforehand. This company will even send you an email. If you buy this one in particular because it has a 220 volt element, they will write to you and say, hey, are you sure? Because this one is not 110 volts or 120 volts like you're normally accustomed to. And of course, you'll either write back, oops, got that one wrong, forget it. Or I wrote back and said, yep, I'm all set for that. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me know. Send that puppy to me. So here it is. And it came with this plug. And this is, you can see how those are oriented. You see those blades, how they're oriented? Now, that's evidently a Chinese style or some other country style because it's not common here in the United States. At least not in that size. This is a 10 amp, 250 volt rated. Okay? 10 amp at 250 volts. Now, you can go from 10 amps to 20 amps to 30. It doesn't matter, I mean, because it's only the capability, not what you're providing. So I went down to a local hardware store for a couple of bucks. I got this. This is a 20 amp, 250 volt plug. Now, this is just a US style. What's the only difference between these two things right here are the location of these and what they look like and what they will fit into. I mean, you can find billions of these all over the United States. You ain't gonna find many of these. That's my point. So what I did was I simply just clipped the end off of this, bared back the wires, and remember we looked up underneath it so we knew where they went. Figure out what the ground wire is. That goes to the grounding lug. And oh, by the way, it's green on the inside, the green screw. And it put it all back together, and boom, boom, yeah, boom. There you go. 240 volts ready to go. But it deserves a little bit more of an explanation. I need to share this with you. And I mean, this will serve you well throughout your brewing experience, and believe it or not, in a lot of other things that you do. And it's just it's like really basic electricity. I just need to show you this. I know every time I bring out the whiteboard, sometimes people they scratch it. No, I know, but a picture speaks 1,000 words, and it's a whole lot easier to explain if you just draw a few lines. Okay, let's do this in EUROP. If I could learn how to spell Europe, I'd be better off today. In the EU, there we go. You have 220 volts is the standard. That's the standard, and it's on 50 hertz. Now I want to make sure that this, I just wrote this here for just right now as a placeholder. We'll talk about that in just a second. It's real brief. In the US, we have 120 volts, and it's actually 60 hertz. And that's just a difference in cycles, okay? It makes a difference in something else, not this, really. But we also have in the US the capability to have 240 volts and the same thing at 60 hertz. That's the standard, all right? Now and China is very similar to the EU. You have 3 different color wires. This one is actually 220 volts. This one is a ground, and this one is a neutral. So when you connect this one and this one to your device, you got 220 volts going to it, okay? That's the way that works. It just gives it a path. This ground is for safety, all right? All right. Now, when we go to the U.S., the convention or standard is black is 120 volts, the green is ground, and the white is neutral. Very similar. I mean, it's exactly the same. But the difference here is that when you connect this to your device, you get 120 volts because you're only connecting this 120 volt leg, whereas here you're connecting 220 volts. Okay, you're with me. Now when we have 240 volts on just 3 wires, you'll have 120 volts ground and 120 volts. But the difference between these two is that when this one is high and then low and then high, then this one is, oh, I got to get this thing written right. Oh, there we go. This one, yep. There. So here's the zero crossing. So when one is high, the other is low. Not making sense yet? When this wire is high, this wire is low, below zero, above zero, 120, below zero, 120. And the same thing happens when they switch. So they're always 180 degrees opposite of each other. So when you connect these two together, they create their own neutral. So now you've got 240 volts here. And your ground is the safety. Okay, so there's no need for that extra neutral wire. Take this one step further. If you had a 4th wire, and that is another normal convention in the U.S., that would be a neutral. Like your stove. You know, your stove has 240 volts to operate all the elements and stuff, but you got a clock, you know, you got a light, you got a fan, you know, so you don't need 240 volts for that. The 120 volts is more than sufficient, and it's a whole lot easier to connect. So what they'll do is they'll just tap this line, and goes to the fan. Just say it goes to a light, and then they'll tap the neutral and go to the light, and now they've only got 120 volts going there, lighting that light. So that's what that 4th wire would be for. But if you don't have that 4th wire, your only possibility is these two together for 240. That's what we're going to do. So we're just going to put 240 volts in here, just like we would have put 220 volts in here. Now, will it handle it? Absolutely. Absolutely, it'll handle it. Now, what was the difference between 50 and 60 hertz? Timing, okay? Years and years ago when I was in Europe, we had to use a transformer. And you plug your transformer into 220 volts, 50 hertz. And you'd run your American-made digital clock, or you know, whatever the case may be, you know, which was really rated at 60 hertz at 120 volts. Now I can get 120 volts into it, but I was still getting 50 hertz, so that means the digital clock was off. It would never quite, you see, so it has a lot to do with timing. There's circuitry now that corrects for that, regardless of what you plug it into, so you have to worry about that much anymore. But when you're into fine-tuning into circuitry, that's where these really play a major role, okay, in timing. Now, hopefully that clears up the electrical requirements for a foreign-made still. Yes, you can adapt them to the U.S., or you can adapt the U.S. one to Europe. It's just a little bit of handiwork, and as long as you don't have anything in there, well, believe it or not, like I said, most circuitry is already designed to withstand a 50, 60 hertz difference. The primary difference in most countries really revolves around these prongs and how they're designed and sort of what their standard is within their market. The providing of electricity itself is almost universal. And I use the term almost because there are some differences, but it's almost universal. So it works just about everywhere. You're not going to violate that. It's just how you get it and where you send it, and are you doing that correctly. I hope I haven't lost anybody. So you can adapt your own still. All right? Happy distilling.